Here, there are the skills, the talent and the enthusiasm.
This is the NASA map that has been issued yesterday.
But these people will not be able to rebuild Beirut on their own.
We have an engineering team and a mapping team working in sync together. We send scouts on little scooters, and their job is to basically go and examine a building and say, hey, this structure is no longer safe to enter.
They're doing all this because their government isn't. Food is given out to people who never had to ask for handouts in their life. Volunteers are given a safety briefing before heading out with clean-up teams. There are hundreds of these camps across Beirut, hastily set up in the shadows of the buildings ripped open by Tuesday's explosion of 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate stored in the port. For international donors, one of the hardest questions is how do they get aid to people who won't skim off the top when they have to deal with a political elite that's been doing exactly that for decades.
The Lebanese authorities now have to put in place the political and economic reforms which are being called for by the Lebanese people. It's the only thing which will allow the international community to act efficiently side by side with Lebanon in its reconstruction.
It could cost up to $15 billion to rebuild Beirut, says the city's governor. Its residents want to make sure that money goes where it should.
The government of Lebanon is a criminal government. This is a criminal state. These are warlords. These are people who are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in the Lebanese civil war. And we're expecting that a few extra bodies is going to make them cringe. That's not going to happen.
On Monday, Lebanon's Prime Minister Hassan Diab will ask his cabinet to agree to early elections. They'd be held within 2 months.
Well, we can now speak to Nadim Houri. He is the Executive Director of the Arab Reform Initiative, and he joins us now on Skype from Paris. Nadim, today's donor conference raised around $300 million, but for short-term relief. I mean, obviously the big concern here is corruption, and Lebanon's track record doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
No, it doesn't. It's corruption and using that money as well as oxygen for the sectarian political parties to strengthen again their clientelistic networks. And this is what the Lebanese protesters have been saying very clearly. Support us. Lebanon needs help at during this crisis, but make sure that you don't support the corrupt political class. That's possible for short-term immediate humanitarian needs, because Lebanon has a sophisticated civil society that has the experience and the capacity to answer quickly. Mm-hmm. It's going to be trickier for major infrastructure reconstruction.
I want to ask you more about that because, Nadim, I was speaking to a UNHCR representative earlier, Mirelle Girard, and she was saying that they're helping with that rollout of immediate humanitarian aid there. But is there a system in place for longer-term reconstruction, especially of infrastructure, as you referred to? Is there a way of trying to get that money to the places where it needs to go?
Well, Lebanon has had experience with reconstruction of major infrastructure after the end of the civil war, after the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. But unfortunately, these experiences have had to go through state institutions that are known to be corrupt. The CDR, Council for the South, the Fund for the Displaced, which are controlled by key political leaders. So I think it's going to require the international community to stand firm, to insist not only on the highest transparency level, but to build in new oversight mechanisms that include independent figures, that include independent civil society, that can account for how the money is being spent in a way that makes sure that it reaches those most in need, but also that it doesn't get diverted to re-strengthen this, political class.
Sure. Nadim, given the government's history with the port and some other sectors, where do you see the biggest risk of corruption? What sectors here?
The sort of grand theft at Lebanon would really be at the level of reconstructing the port, because we're going to talk there about billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And secondly, also on any compensation for destroyed property. Again, this is based on Lebanon's existing experience with reconstruction, where political parties can extract resources in many ways. One, they can fake the lists of those who are victims and who benefit. And we saw that at the end of the Civil War. They can also favor particular contracting companies that are close to these political parties and that feed them kickbacks, or that they use during elections to hire people close to them and to strengthen their clientelistic networks, or directly by overinflating the numbers. I mean, we're already hearing rumors that many international experts are shaking their head in disbelief in some of the initial estimates. Again, this is all very early at this point. But yes, I mean, the bigger question, frankly, is shouldn't it be an opportunity to move beyond this political class to make sure that Lebanon gets a national salvation government? And I'm not talking about a national unity government where all the parties are represented, but actually a salvation government with independent figures that can have the trust of the people, that can work alongside the people with the trust, and that could have the trust of the international community. I think we have a narrow window of opportunity. This current government is finished. They've had 2 resignations. There was another minister that resigned last week. But beyond the number of resignations, it really has no credibility. Not a single one of them has been able to go down to the streets to talk to the people. What kind of government can lead any reconstruction if it does not even dare walk the streets of its own capital?
Sure. Well, you mentioned international trust there. I mean, these initial pledges that we're referring to, this $300 million, that's for the short term. Is the Lebanese government going to be able to convince international donors of transparency in order to get more funds going forward? Or do we need to see a full political transition, a structural change in order for that to happen?
Look, time is of the essence here. And this is why I believe change has to happen at 2 speeds. The first political change, which has to happen very quickly, is that this government has to resign. It has to resign simply on its incompetency and its criminal negligence of what's been happening. That can be replaced very quickly by a government of independence that have a strong mandate to do reconstruction. And if it's the right people with the right support, they should be able to work closely with the international community with full sort of transparency and oversight. This transitional government can then lay the basis for the structural changes that are needed in Lebanon's political system. You cannot change a system like Lebanon from one day to the next. You can change the government. That government can start working on a new electoral law. You can set you can, in the meantime, steer the ship that is Lebanon that is sinking. You try to redress it. You try to get it through the storm. And you use the next 18 months, 2 years to lay the groundwork for new elections, a new electoral law, and hopefully new political parties that will replace this corrupt political class that has destroyed Lebanon during the Civil War and manages to destroy it again and again and again.
I'm sure a very long road still ahead. Nadeem Houri there, the Executive Director of the Arab Reform Initiative, speaking to us from Paris. Great to get your thoughts here on Al Jazeera. Nadeem, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.